Well, welcome to our first show, The Circle of Insight. My name is Carlos Vasquez. This show will discuss polynomic psychology. Polynomics is a term that I have coined. It means the psychology of politics and economics. The purpose of Circle of Insight is to foster an environment of collaboration for education so we can begin a path towards a better America. Our first guest is a very special friend of mine by the name of Father Chris Turhesh. Father Chris is the president of the Romanian Greek Catholic Association, as well as the Romanian Community Coalition. He's also a member of the Romanian Community Coalition. Father Chris and I today will discuss Romania in a lot of different ways. We're going to discuss the economy. We're going to talk a little bit about communism. We're going to talk about the psychological implications that happen under communism, as well as the sociological implications. We're going to discuss a little bit about his bio and a little bit about his history, as well as the future of Romania. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Father Chris Turhesh.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining.
My pleasure.
So let's start off a little bit about your bio. Let's learn a little bit about you. So how was it growing up in Romania?
I was born in 1978 under communism. In 2002, I came to the United States. But since you asked me, how was under communism?
Yeah.
I would say I have good memories and bad memories. I would start with the good memories first. As a kid, I would say I used to spend a lot of time to my grandparents in a village where we had the opportunity to play with other kids and have, I would say, enough food. On the other side, as far as the bad memories, while I was in the city with my parents, with my family, the food was rationalized and you had to stay in line to buy food, for example.
So you went to the village to be able to get food?
Yes.
Wow.
I would say the families that lived in the city and were lucky to have any other family members in the village, the family members in the village provided them with food.
Now, why were the people in the village, how would you say, safe away from communism, or the soldiers, or that? Why were they able to keep the food and have more food than the people in the city?
I would not say that they were safe, but the fact they had a house and they had some land around the house, they were able to grow their own animals, I would say.
Okay.
Have a cow, some sheep. Any extra land that they had was taken by the communists and became part of a collectivist forum, I would say.
Did they have a rationing of how many animals they could have, how many cows, or how many pigs?
Yes, if you have more than a certain amount of animals, you had to pay extra taxes. Also, what you had to do, if you had extra land, for example, around your house, you had to provide a percentage from whatever you were able to harvest from the land.
Oh, wow. The funny thing is, I just remember from Cuba, my dad used to tell me the stories that they would imprison you if they ever found you with beef.
Yes.
Same thing in communism.
Yes, you were not allowed. You were not allowed to kill, for example, a cow, for example.
Now, could the government do it?
Yes. Yeah. What they did, they just came and they said, "I want this," and they took it, and you could not.
That's
do
fair,
anything.
isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And can you tell me a little bit about the life in the village? What kind of attitudes did your grandparents have? Were they full of hope, or were they always afraid? What kind of feelings did you see there?
I would say we grew up in fear. Fear because you never knew when the communists are going to come, or representatives of the communist regime are going to come and, for example, search your house for whatever, for weapons, for example, or for God knows what.
Did it ever happen to you?
Not to me, but to other people in the village. On the other side, if you got caught, for example, listening to Radio Free Europe or Radio Voice of America, that was jail.
Really?
Yes.
How long do you know the sentence? A year or two? Or?
I can't recall. I was too young. But anyway, if you got caught, you were done. So what we used to do, for example, we used to listen to the radio in one room and turn the water on in the other room so the neighbors will not be able to hear the radio. That was one thing, for example, to avoid, I would say, the communists.
Human innovation there.
Yes.
And something that always fascinated me is, what was the police force like? Were you afraid of the police, or if somebody stole something from you, were you able to call them for help?
It's not like here in the United States. People try to stay away from it was not called police, it was called militia, or militia, kind of like
militia.
that.
All
Yes.
right.
They were very aggressive, very oppressive. They did not have any respect towards the human beings. Sometimes, for example, if you were robbed, you called them. They came and they start asking you questions like you were the criminal. So,
What did they do to the criminals that robbed?
If a criminal would have been caught, they would have beat him and
Okay.
before he would have been thrown in jail. So people were afraid of the police or of the militia because they were seen, I would say, as an oppressive force. Besides the police, we had what was called the secret police, the equivalent of, how should I say it, maybe a combination of FBI and CIA here in United States. This was the police that was spying on people. For example, in every institution, there were 2 or 3 spies. They did not know each other, but everybody knew that he spied by somebody else. So nobody was able to trust each other. So, for example, this is a real story that I heard from somebody who, was able to read a lot of the documents in the archives. For example, if I was spying on you, I would have to give a note every week or every whatever, periodically about you. What do you do? What do you say? Who do you meet with? Everything. So, for example, I was talking to you when I saw that you drink coffee with salt instead of sugar, right? That's kind of unusual.
Sure.
I would report that. Then the secret police would call you and they would say, say it. What? Say whatever you have to say. What? Just say it, write it. And you would say, I don't know anything. We know everything that you know because we know that you drink coffee with salt. So when you hear that, it's a small detail, about your personal life. Who in the world? Exactly. Then you would realize if they know that I drink coffee with salt, more than likely they know God knows what else. And then you start saying,
that's one of the big
betraying
psychological.
Exactly. So they take that information from you and use it against another person. That's the reason why we had instances, for example, when kids turn on their parents and vice versa. Or, somebody turn on his or her relatives. Using exactly this technique.
Because in the world of psychology, we know, and you may tell me if this is true or not in your country, but psychology, when you have a lot of fear like that, your anxiety levels go up, you tend to eat more, you tend to drink more, you tend to do drugs. Is there an issue in Romania with alcohol and drugs?
I would say with alcohol.
In
certain parts of Romania, especially in villages, yes.
Because of that fear, you think?
Because of fear. I mean, back in the days, it was fear. Now, I would say is the lack of hope.
Oh, that's pretty powerful too. Yeah, when you have no hope for the future, that's a big problem.
Yes.
Now, I know we talked a little bit about this before, how Romanians see communism. Now, you're showing us what they're going through, which is terrible. But how do they see communism because communism left Romania?
Yes, in 1989, with the collapse of Iron Curtain and the entire communism, I would say, collapsed in Eastern Europe in 1989, 1990.
That's right.
So we've been through this period of transition from communism to democracy or to an open society. And now it's been 24, 25 years later, and we are still going through that transition.
The generation change.
Exactly.
Now, you were saying there was something we talked about earlier, like I said, Romanians and how they view communism now.
Yes, I've seen some statistics, and if I'm recalling correctly, about 60% or so of the Romanians who are living right now in Romania, they miss communism.
They miss communism.
Yes, obviously the older one, they say it was better under communism, and at some extent, in their eyes, it was better because once you finish high school, you had a job. It was much easier, for example, to get an apartment. It was much easier everything was so, I will not say organized, but everything, you knew exactly what is going to happen tomorrow. You lived in the same routine.
So you had certainty.
Exactly. You had, tomorrow I have to wake up at 5 o'clock, stay in line to buy bread. Okay? It became a part of your life routine. And it's interesting, since we are talking about psychology, it's interesting how human beings evolve and adapt. I have a guy in the church, in my church over here in the US, who was imprisoned by communists for 16 years. He was arrested when he was 18 years old, and he was in prison for 16 years.
16 years,
exactly.
Wow.
So he told us that at the beginning of the imprisonment, they used to beat the guards used to beat the prisoners without any reason. They were just called in one room and they beat the crap out of them. Every day, day after day, without asking them any questions, just for the sake of it. And after a while, they stopped the beating. And all these prisoners who were beat, they start, man, is something wrong. They don't beat us anymore. So it's interesting how human beings adapt.
That's very
even
true.
to this kind of harsh environment.
That's really similar to the Stockholm syndrome as well, when the person gets taken captive and then all of a sudden loyalty develops with their captor.
Yes.
They start becoming protective. That's the Stockholm syndrome, so it's really similar. I remember a while back I was talking to a Russian gentleman, and he was a psychologist in Russia. And he was telling me that after the wall came down, and I think it was 1989.
Yes, 99.
Yeah, right around there. He was telling me their patient level skyrocketed because people had the certainty of communism in a bizarre way. And then when that was gone, the overwhelming amount of freedom, just they couldn't handle
Exactly.
it.
Well, if you read the Bible, for example, you will see that the same thing happened with the Jewish people. When they were freed by the Moses from Egypt, right? And, they were in slavery, they were abused, it was bad for them, right?
Yes.
So they left, they fled Egypt. Now they were free. And once they got in the desert, they started complaining and lashing at Moses, saying that it was better for us when we were in Egypt because
That's a good point.
we knew that we were slaves, but at least we had something to eat. And you brought us here in the middle of nowhere, and now we have to search for food.
That's a good point. I didn't even think that. It's true. Now, speaking of that, on that note, we were talking a little bit about religious freedom.
Yes.
What is going on in Romania in regards to religious freedom?
You see that I'm a priest. I wear the collar.
Sure.
I'm an Eastern Rite Catholic priest, as is now here in the U.S. In Romania, we are known as Greek Catholics.
Can we, just for the audience sake, can you
Yes.
tell us the difference between the Greek and the
Roman Catholic.
Roman Catholic,
Yes. In the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church is a unity in diversity. So there are multiple branches in the Catholic Church. The biggest branch is the Roman Catholic Church. But there are many other branches, especially in Eastern Europe. Every country has its own, I would say, local church, which is in full communion with the Pope. We are one of those churches. In other words, if you compare the Roman Catholic Church with the Romanian Greek Catholic Church, we are equal. The sacraments are recognized by each other. We have our own head as our own head of the church, but we also acknowledge the Pope as the successor of Peter.
Okay.
This is the difference between us and the Orthodox.
Perfect.
The Orthodox, we share the same rite, the same liturgical practice, everything in the church, the same as the Orthodox, but we acknowledge the Pope, they don't. That's the main difference.
So what is going on in Romania with religious freedom? Can you wear that collar in Romania?
Now, yes, but back when I was born and raised, we could not.
You could not.
In 1948, after the Soviet Union occupied the entire Eastern Europe, with Stalin, when they pushed the Nazis back, they imposed in Romania their own government that they wanted. And in 1948, they abolished the Romanian Greek Catholic Church. In other words, on November 30th, 1948, they passed a law, or December 1st, stating as of tomorrow, the Romanian Greek Catholic Church ceased to exist.
Why do you think they did that?
Because Stalin had a different view about how to proclaim communism than Lenin. Lenin said that he has to get rid of all the priests and all the representatives of the church, which he did. Tens of thousands of people were killed in Soviet Union under Stalin. So there was a void of priests under Lenin. When Stalin came in power, he realized that instead of creating all these martyrs, and having the church against him, he could use the church actually to control the people. So all that vacuum created by those tens of thousands of killings by Lenin were filled with priests by Stalin who start proclaiming communism. That happened in Russia. So when they occupied the Eastern Europe, for example, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, they did exactly the same thing. Because, as I said, the difference between the Orthodox Church and the Greek Catholic Church is that they don't acknowledge the Pope and we do. By not acknowledging the Pope, the Orthodox Church is pretty much under the government. Regardless who is in charge of the country, they, at some extent, respond to them, or they are very sympathetic to the power, regardless of about how evil or how bad that power is.
How much does the church have power today?
It's the same. I mean, once we were abolished by communists, the leaders of our church were thrown in jail, priests were arrested, people who said that there are Greek Catholics, they were thrown in jail. All of our bishops, thousands of priests, tens of thousands of people were jailed, most of them died in prison. After the fall of communism in 1989, the church was officially reinstated, but all the properties that were confiscated from us were not given back to us. So we have right now, 25 years after the fall of communism, situations where people say that they are Greek Catholics, but they can't pray or worship, I would say, in their own church, because the church was taken by the communists, given to the Orthodox, and they don't want to return it back.
Interesting.
We have instances, for example, where our own people cannot bury their deceased in the cemetery. If we have kids in school, for example, and the teacher knows that the kid is Greek Catholic, he's harassed, abused. Today, yes.
Wow.
U.S. State Department is releasing a report every year called International Religious Freedom Report, and they have a special report about Romania. If you read that report, most of the abuses mentioned in that report are about
International Religious Freedom Report.
Exactly. Are about the situation of the Greek Catholic Church in Romania.
Now, is it specifically only for the Greek Catholic, or is it also the Jewish people? Or?
No, here's the thing. We were the only denomination abolished by communists for exactly that reason. We refused to cooperate with communists. Again, the majority of the population in Romania when the communists came were Orthodox. But since we share the same right as the Orthodox Church, the communists thought that if they bribe the Orthodox and they bribe us, they will be able to control the entire population of the country. But we refuse to do so. So Stalin said, okay, you don't want to do what we say, we will abolish you, force all these people to become Orthodox overnight. The only thing that they have to do is not to acknowledge the Pope anymore, because everything else was the same, the ritual in the church, whatever the tradition. And that way, he was able to control the country. And here's an interesting thing. I just saw yesterday, President Obama was in Poland, for example, and he invited the presidents of all the Eastern European countries because of the situation in Ukraine.
He spoke today to Poroshenko.
And he said something very interesting. He thanked the Catholic Church for her involvement in the fall of communism in Poland, because that's where everything started. So if you look on the map, for example, communism was most oppressive where the country was Orthodox. If you look in Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Russia, the further east you go, the harsher communism you'll find because of that.
That's interesting.
They use the priests to proclaim communism in the church, and indoctrinate people.
That's interesting. We're going to move on to Romania and its government, but before we get there, we want to talk a little bit about Romania. One of the things we found out, Romania is almost the size of California. It's got about 22 million people in Romania. The average age is about 38, so it has an aging population. The birth rate is really low relative to other countries in the world. I think it's 206 out of about 250. So there is some concern in Romania in regards to their aging population, and there's a migration issue that you mentioned earlier. Now, where are they going and why? Do you know?
A lot of them, a lot of the Romanians are leaving the country to work in Western Europe. Okay. Because of this transitional period in Romania, and it's very hard to find jobs. The economy it's in the hands of few oligarchs who are controlling everything. So you cannot start a business, for example, or you can start a business, but you cannot succeed with the business unless you become a corrupt businessman. So pretty much they have no opportunities, and they have to leave the country. They leave. A lot of them are leaving their families behind, because that's another reason for the low birth rate. For example, the men are leaving the country, they go in Western Europe to work, and the women are left home.
So you have a lot of people leaving the country. A lot of the men are leaving the country. So the future of Romania in regards to economics, how does it look to you? Since you're in the middle of it all.
Well,
doesn't sound very positive from my angle.
I'm not looking at how the situation is right now, but how I would like the situation to be. And I think we can improve the situation in Romania. For example, if we help strengthening the rule of law in Romania, for example, and there are certain institutions that are fighting corruption, if we can help them become stronger, more effective, arresting more people, being tougher on corruption, high-level corruption, that will provide more opportunities to the Romanian people to fulfill their dreams to pursue their dreams in Romania. Wonderful. That's what I'm trying to do. In other words, instead of recognizing or acknowledging the current situation, I want to change the current situation for the best.
That's good. So it's safe to say, because I know they found some gas reserves in Romania. Is it safe to say it's going to go to the hands of the oligarchs? It's really not going to go to the private sector? Or do you think it actually might influence the private sector?
The law is different in Romania than here in the U.S. For example, here in the U.S., if you buy a land, anything that is below or underground is yours. Oil, gas, gold, silver, whatever, is yours here in the U.S., not in Romania.
Oh, okay, here. Okay.
In Romania, you can use the land, whatever is at the surface of the land, but whatever is underneath, it's of the state. So that's the problem right now, because we had Exxon and Chevron who found a lot of gas reserves. Now people are upset because you have few corrupt people in the government who want to give these contracts out, and nobody knows exactly for how much money and what is going to happen with the money.
There's no transparency over there either.
That is one of the things that we are trying to promote in Romania. Transparency. Without transparency, you will not be able to know what is happening with the money. And we have, as I said, few oligarchs who are controlling key sectors of the economy, and they move the money around. They buy media outlets, for example, and they are able to control pretty much the whole country. Only a handful of people.
How long? Do you know how long the terms these oligarchs have been there? Have they been there for 10 years, 15 years since
I would say after the fall of communism. Because see, this is what happened. In communism, for example, we were not allowed to leave the country. So we heard on Radio Free Europe, I remember when I was a kid, about capitalism. Mm-hmm. What is that? Or that you can go to a store and buy something that you want. We could not comprehend something like that, because we went to a store and all the shelves were empty. The only thing that you went to a store to buy was bread, for example. And even for that, you had to stay in line. Or milk, you had to stay in line. Meat, you need to know days ahead when they will have meat at a certain store. And
you have to tell us a story so the audience hears the story about when you went to get cheese at the store. Because this will show you the psychological differences of people coming from a communist country to a capitalist country. What happened to you that day when your wife sent you out to get cheese?
Yes. He mentioned my wife in the Eastern Rite. Catholic Church, we are allowed to marry if we decide. So one day my wife says, go to store and buy some cheese. So obviously I went to store and I looked at a shelf full of different brands of cheese, and after a few minutes I got so frustrated because I did not know which one to buy. And I called her and I said, look, I will send you a picture. I will send you got to look at all these brands and you got to tell me which one you want to buy, because I was not used to pick, what kind of cheese or what kind of brand of cheese do you want to buy? Because back in the days in Romania, you were happy to buy cheese, whatever cheese or brand that was.
That was it. It's an amazing thing. It's psychologically, a simple thing like buying cheese can cause so much anxiety and frustration. Just because
I have a problem. I have a problem going shopping.
Still,
my wife sometimes, laughs at me, and I said, look, if you don't want me to stress you out, you gotta go and buy whatever you want. Because if I go over there and in 3 minutes, if I don't find what I need, I'm done.
That might be a male thing, probably. I don't know. Maybe. Can you tell us a little bit? There was a story you mentioned earlier, because we know now that we're getting close to the end of the show, we know some of the horrible things that are happening in Romania. We're trying to find out how we can help. But you told me a story earlier that you got from the Bible.
Yes.
With 4 friends?
Yes, there's a story in the Bible with 4 friends who saw a friend of theirs who was not able to walk. They heard about Jesus, that Jesus is in the house and he's preaching the gospel. They brought his friend over, but they could not bring the friend in the house because the house was full of people. So what they did, they went on the roof of the house. They destroyed the roof, and they laid down the paralyzed in front of Jesus. And the Bible says the following: when Jesus saw their faith, told this guy, you take up your bed and walk. And when I read that verse, I realized the importance of faith in everything that we do. Often we relate, or we consider the faith the 2 hours when we stay in church on Sunday. Faith should be part of our lives. Every day, every moment, when we go to work, when we come to work, when we drive, when we stay home, when we do whatever we want, whatever we do, faith should be part of our life. Also, the Bible says that we are called to be the light of the world. So the absence of light is darkness. The absence of good is evil. Being here in the U.S. for so long, 12 years, I was able to learn all these great things about this society. And looking back at my country, I feel the same as those 4 friends who see the 5th one, unable to walk, but seeing the hope over there. So what I'm trying to do, along with other Romanians in the Romanian American community, is to help our brothers and sisters in Romania pretty much to walk. Teach them what democracy is, what transparency is, what freedom is. Because if you're born and raised in slavery, it's very hard for you to understand what freedom, what democracy, and what liberty is.
And how can we help you here? And I know you're writing letters to Congress. You're urging Romanian officials to fight against corruption.
Yes, the biggest problem that we have right now in Romania, and it's acknowledged even by the representatives of the U.S. government and the executive branch. Even Vice President Biden visited Romania a few weeks ago. President Obama mentioned in his speech in Poland that the biggest problem of the countries in Eastern Europe is corruption. So what I would really like from everybody who's watching this show is to access our website, rogca.org, subscribe to our newsletter, and donate, if it's possible, to support the fight against corruption and transparency in Romania.
Thank you so much, Father Chris. Thank you very much for coming to the show. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. This is our first episode of the Circle of Insight. We look forward to having you in future shows. Every Wednesday at 4:30, we'll have a different guest talking about different issues in regards to politics, economics, and psychology. So we really hope you join us next Wednesday, June 11th, for another exciting episode. Have a wonderful week.